coaching me to stick to try and get the idea that learning becomes efficient, because at the moment it's not hugely efficient. Players learn up to a certain point, but when it's tested, it doesn't really work for us. If you're in a tennis academy somewhere, if you're in your club and you're coaching, you'll almost certainly, with whatever you're trying to teach, see some improvement. But what you're seeing there is really a form of like repetition. You've told your player to do something, they'll do it. That's fine. That's repetition. It's not learning. Learning, it happens when later on in a testing situation, in a competition, they can replicate the skill. So we fool ourselves sometimes into thinking that teaching has happened because we see repetition in front of us, but it actually hasn't. So ultimately the aim is to try and move away a little bit from direction, just constantly passing over information, and instead try to get to the point where we're helping the player to get the information themselves, to find solutions for themselves. Because the people we saw in the videos at the start certainly didn't find out, I presume, how to hit a ball through their legs, or how to hit a drop shot, or how to react in the ways that they did. They didn't learn those things, I assume, from somebody sitting them down and saying, if somebody hits it over your head, this is what you do. They learned it in different ways. I just wanted to end, if I could, with a few words, which isn't directly related to the topic at hand, but about coach education. Because if we're trying to get our players to this point, and we're saying that our players need to learn to do this, and I'm suggesting to you that the best way for the players to learn is to find information for themselves, the obvious question then is, what about the coaches who are coaching the players? Because the coaches themselves need to learn this information somewhere to be able to pass it on. And hopefully, if anybody's been paying attention, you'll know that probably what I would think is that we probably shouldn't do what a lot of coach education systems do now. Because what a lot of coach education systems do now is they'll prepare a manual which is full of all the steps that a coach should take when they're coaching somebody, and they might turn up to a coaching course and the instructors will say, when you're coaching you should do this, and then you should do this, and then you should do that. And I don't know if you can see, that's exactly what we're saying is probably not a good way to teach anything, or to coach. That's not the way we should be coaching our players, so probably not the way we should be teaching our coaches. But we do this because it's a pretty straightforward way to pass on information. So as a national association, we get people who want to be coaches, and we stand up in front, and we say, this is how you coach, and we direct them. So then what happens to that coach when they go onto their courts? The exact same as when a player goes on to play. The coach will go onto the court, and they will coach the way they're comfortable with, because they got all of the information, their brain is overloaded with all the possible things that might happen in the court, so they can't deal with that, so they're going to just fall back to what they're comfortable with. And this is really the same problem that we want to avoid with players, is the same problem we want to avoid with coaches. So really it's the exact same principle, that if we're trying to train coaches to work with our players, the coach needs to understand the task, find out the information for themselves, be totally engaged with the material, and all the exact same principles apply. Because if we don't get that stage right, the coaches that we produce then won't be able to coach the players effectively. So I know it's not exactly what we were talking about, but it's kind of a very important step before that. So when we get into any form of teaching, like a recipe, where we say you do this first, then you do this, then you do this, whether we're talking about players or whether we're talking about coaches, it doesn't work. It works up to a point, and you produce players or coaches who are competent, but not going to get us towards the elite level. Because under pressure, you fall back on what you're comfortable with. Ultimately, the best coaches are, if we asked everybody what's a great coach, we'd probably use some of these words: inspirational, innovative, exciting. And you don't get that type of coach by handing them a manual and saying, learn this manual. So we really need to, as much as possible, make our coaching courses, as well as our coaching on the court, as implicit as possible, and help our coaches find solutions, in the same way that we should be helping our players find solutions. Because if we use this approach, we'll actually nurture the right type of learning. So direct instruction isn't effective when we're dealing with players, and it's not effective when we're trying to develop coaches. So ultimately what we're looking for in helping our coaches is we should be basically having methodologies that have core principles, like how people learn, but then giving people flexibility to work around that, and letting our coaches come up with solutions, find ideas, experiment with things, because when they find the correct solution or the one that works for them, they'll remember it much more, and it will work in situations of intense pressure. So coaching programs, conferences, it's all about high content, lots of information, but strong on the core principles and letting people implement it and test it in their own ways. Now, you'll be delighted to see the word conclusion because there's tea and coffee coming. 2 minutes and we're done. Teaching isn't always learning. We think we teach. I think I'm teaching now because I'm standing here going like this, but I don't know if anybody's paying any attention. So it's invisible. It's, in this situation, on a court, we just don't know. So we convince ourselves that we have taught something because we taught it. But that doesn't mean it's been effective at all. And I think that's what we all kind of need to question on our courts. And constantly adding more and more and more makes us feel better and better and better, but doesn't necessarily improve our players. So what we need instead is to really focus on learning and not replication. And just because a player did something we showed them doesn't mean they've learned it. We need to really test it under real conditions. And when they can do that, we've done our job. But until that point, we're not finished and we have to kind of go back again. So I suppose at the end of it, what I would say is there's a lot of information here. And I know at the start I said it's incredibly complicated to kind of teach somebody something. And our aim is to try and make that as simple as possible. So really I would try and urge you all not to get totally caught up in any one specific teaching methodology. The idea is to stick to core fundamentals and to just keep coming back to the same questions the whole time of does the player understand the task? So spending time really making sure they fully understand it. Where did the information come from? So we're helping them find out the information the whole time. What are the demands on them cognitively? Like, can we come up with a way that they can interact with whatever we're trying to teach them, rather than just having them sitting there and receiving all this information? With practice, we're looking at variety, but really variety, not just us all telling ourselves we use a variety of systems, and ultimately just being slightly aware that we should be pulling players towards things rather than pushing them the whole time, which we all kind of know. So last thing, and then we're done, is that making learning simple is hard. There's no doubt about it. It's difficult. It takes more work for us, but I hope the reasons are obvious. I think it's pretty clear if somebody understands something and if they find it for themselves, and all those core principles, I think they make sense. So it is hard. The reasons are obvious. The work is much better. It's much more fun working with learners, trying to help them find solutions than standing here just speaking. And the benefits are significant because the learning then is robust and long-term and it stays under pressure and it doesn't fall apart. So I am going to stop speaking. Thank you.